The warship stretched across the stars. Like a metal mountain, its shadow fell over the broken remains of Earth's last defense fleet. Twisted hulls drifted in the void, emergency beacons blinked in the darkness, calling for help that would never come. High Executive stood at the center of his throne room and watched the human shuttle approach. His four arms were folded behind his back. His scaled face showed no emotion, but inside he felt the warm glow of complete victory. 6 months, that was all it had taken to crush humanity's military power. Their colonies had fallen one by one. Their fleets had burned. Now the Sol system itself was surrounded by 300 warships. Earth had no choice but to surrender. The throne room was filled with representatives from a dozen species. All of them were subjects of the Empire. All of them had been conquered just like humanity was being conquered today. They had come to watch to see another proud species brought low, to remind themselves that resistance against the Empire was foolish. Chief Advisor, a thin named, leaned close. The human shuttle has docked. High Executive, they have sent only one representative. One let out a low rumble of amusement. They send one person to negotiate the fate of their entire species. It appears so. A diplomat named Bring her in. Let us finish this. The great doors opened. Every eye in the throne room turned to watch. Walked in alone. She was a small woman with gray hair pulled back from her face. She wore a simple dark suit. No medals, no symbols of rank. She carried only a small bag over her shoulder. She did not look afraid. Studied her as she approached. He had destroyed her people's military. He had killed millions. He held the power to glass her entire planet, and yet she walked toward him like she was attending a business meeting. Perhaps humans were simply too stupid to understand their situation, said Snorts, his voice echoing through the chamber. You stand before the High Executive of the Empire. You come to accept the surrender of your species. Do you understand this? I do, said her voice was calm and clear. Good, gestured, and a holographic document appeared in the air between them. These are our terms. You will read them and sign them. Looked at the document. She took her time reading each section carefully. The watching representatives began to whisper among themselves. Some laughed quietly. This human was reading surrender terms like they were a contract for office supplies. The terms were harsh. Complete disarmament of all human forces. 70% of Earth's resources would go to the Empire. As tribute, troops would occupy all human worlds permanently. Humans would have no voice in imperial politics. Would exist to serve. Finished reading. She looked up at, I have some questions about Section 14, she said. The throne room went silent. Then laughter erupted from the gathered representatives. Conquered species asking questions about their own surrender. Raised one hand and the laughter stopped. He was amused but also curious. Ask your questions, human. Section 14 describes the tribute schedule. It says 70% of agricultural output. Does that include hydroponics facilities or only traditional farming? Blinked all food production. I see. In Section 22 regarding movement of human citizens are work permits required for travel between occupied zones or only for travel off-world. For the next hour asked detailed questions about nearly every section of the surrender document. She wanted to know about taxation rates, about education policies about health care, provisions for occupied populations. Answered her questions, his amusement slowly turning to confusion. This was not how conquered species behaved. They begged, they wept, they raged uselessly against their fate. They did not ask about administrative procedures. Finally nodded, thank you for the clarifications. I'm prepared to sign. She pressed her thumb to the document. It glowed briefly, recording her biometric signature. The surrender of humanity was complete. A cheer rose from the officers in the room. The other subject species watched in silence, remembering their own surrenders, remembering the hope that had died in them on days just like this one. Reached into her bag and pulled out a small data chip. She held it up so could see it. What is that? He asked. A gift, said humanity to the Empire. Our compliance with this agreement is conditional on your adherence to 3 simple rules. This chip contains them. Took the chip. It was so small in his massive hand. You are in no position to set conditions, human. They are not demands, said. Think of them as guidelines, suggestions for a smooth occupation. I believe you will find them reasonable. And if we do not follow your guidelines, smiled, it was a small smile, almost sad, then we will have to revisit our arrangement. More laughter from the throne room. This tiny human woman standing in the heart of power, speaking of revisiting arrangements. It was absurd. Drop the chip into a pocket. He would look at it later if he remembered. Take her to the shuttle bay. She may return to her conquered world. Guard stepped forward to escort out. She walked with the same calm pace she had entered with. At the door she paused and looked back. High executive, she said, I hope you will read those rules carefully, especially rule number 2. Then she was gone, a move to side. What do you think she meant by that? Nothing, said the desperate words of a defeated people. They cannot accept their loss, so they pretend they still have power. He gestured dismissively. Begin the occupation. I want troops on Earth within the week. Later that night, a junior officer named found herself thinking about the human diplomat. There had been something strange about her, something that did not fit. On impulse, retrieved the data chip from his discarded robe. She inserted it into reader. 3 rules appeared on the screen. Rule number 1, we will cooperate fully with reasonable governance. Rule number 2, ENCRYPTED, access restricted. Rule number 3, there will be no rule. Number 4, stared at the screen for a long time. Rule 1 seemed straightforward enough. Rule 3 was confusing, but Rule 2, why would they humans encrypt part of their own message? She tried several decryption protocols. None of them worked. Encryption was beyond anything she had seen before. She considered reporting this to her superiors, but what would she say? That the conquered humans had given them a list of rules with 1 rule hidden. They would laugh at her. She deleted the file from her personal device and tried to forget about it, but in the weeks that followed, as troops landed on Earth and began the occupation, could not shake a strange feeling. The humans were not behaving like a conquered people. They did not fight. They did not resist. They followed every order, met every demand, accepted every restriction. They were perfect subjects. And that thought was wrong. Every species fought back, at least at first. Every species had rebels and resistance fighters. Every species had pride that needed to be broken, but not humans. They cooperated fully, just like rule number 1 said they would. Wondered what would happen when they stopped. 3 years had passed since humanity's surrender. Governor Ott in her office high above the city once called New York and looked out at the world she controlled. Earth was the perfect colony. In 3 years, there had been no rebellions, no terrorist attacks, no resistance movements. Humans went to work. They paid their tribute. They followed the laws. They smiled at soldiers in the streets. It was disturbing. I had governed 3 other conquered worlds before this assignment. Each one had been a nightmare of constant rebellion and brutal suppression that had fought for 2 decades before finally breaking. That had assassinated 3 governors before accepting their fate. Even the peaceful had organized silent protests and worked slowdowns. But humans, nothing. She opened her daily report and scanned the numbers. Tribute collection was at 102% of quota. Human workers had actually exceeded their required output. Crime rates were lower than they had been before the conquest. Human engineers had volunteered to help maintain military equipment, and their work was excellent. It was wrong, Olive. It was wrong. Her door chimed. Enter, she said. Intelligence officer walked in. She was young for her position, but sharp. I had learned to trust her instincts. You asked for my report on human integration. Governor Yassid sat across from her and activated a holographic display. Charts and graphs filled the air between them. Humans have become essential to imperial operations in this sector, said their engineers. Now maintain 40% of our military vessels. Human administrators run 60% of our regional logistics networks. Human financial experts manage most of our trade systems. A frown that seems like a large percentage. It is, and it has happened gradually, almost invisibly. Humans volunteer for these positions. They work harder than required. They solve problems without being asked. They have made themselves useful in every area of imperial administration. Is that not a good thing? A cooperative subject species hesitated perhaps, but there is something else. She changed the display. Now it showed cultural data, music, charts, entertainment statistics, social network analysis. Human cultural products have spread throughout the empire. Their music is popular on 17 worlds. Their stories and games are consumed by billions of imperial citizens, including members of other subject species. Human languages are being learned as second languages by young people across the sector. Entertainment is harmless, said. Is it? Leaned forward. The resistance used songs to coordinate their rebellion. They use stories to keep their culture alive. During occupation, culture is not harmless. Governor, culture is how species remember who they are. I considered this. What are you suggesting? I am suggesting that humans are playing a longer game than we realized. They are not resisting us with weapons. They are making themselves essential. They are spreading their influence. They are becoming part of the empire's foundation. To what end, I do not know, but I believe we should investigate further. Waved a hand dismissively. You are seeing threats where none exist. Humans are simply a practical species. They have accepted their defeat and are making the best of their situation. That Izal wanted to argue, but she knew better. Governors did not like being questioned. Yes, Governor, after Lefta returned to her reports, but a small seed of doubt had been planted. Meanwhile, in a modest office in what used to be Geneva was having a very different kind of meeting. The room was filled with representatives from 6 different subject species, a warrior with scales, a diplomat with her silver eyes, a philosopher with his patient smile, and others, all of them brought low by conquest, all of them living under imperial rule. Serve them tea. It was a human custom they had all come to appreciate. The cultural exchange programs are working well, said the whose name was Thorn. My people are learning human songs about freedom, songs about hope. The young ones especially, added the whose name was Mirror. They share human stories on the networks, stories where the small defeat the powerful, where patience wins over force. Nodded. Good, but we must be careful. The Empire is watching. They watch, but they do not see, said the whose name was gentle voice. They look for weapons. They look for bombs. They do not understand that ideas are more dangerous than either. The door opened and a young human man slipped inside. He worked in the communication center. He placed a small device on the table. There is an intelligence officer named, he said. She is asking questions. She accessed the 3 rules document today. Expression did not change. She found the encryption on rule 2. Yes, she could not break it. She was not supposed to break it. Not yet. Sipped her tea. The encryption is keyed to specific trigger phrases. When they violate rule 1, when they move beyond reasonable governance, the encryption will unlock, and only for those who are actively searching for it. Mirror leaned forward. You want them to find it? I do not understand. Fear is most powerful when it is discovered, not when it is announced. Said when finally reads rule 2, she will understand what we have built, and she will know that we did it while smiling and cooperating and being perfect subjects. What did you build? Thorn asked. Set down her tea. We built dependence. We made ourselves essential to every system the Empire uses to control this sector. Their ships need our engineers. Their trade needs our administrators. Their communications need our technicians. We are the foundation now. And what happens when you remove the foundation? Gentle voice asked softly. Everything falls, but we will not remove it. We will simply stop building it. Higher, we will do exactly what is required and nothing more. And the Empire, which has grown used to us exceeding expectations, will begin to crumble. The representatives looked at each other. They had all tried to fight. They had all lost, but this human woman was describing a different kind of war, a war without weapons, a war of patience and position. How long? Mirror asked. As long as it takes, said. Years, decades, however long is needed. We are patient, we are stubborn, and we never forget. She looked around the room at these representatives of conquered peoples. When the time comes, she said, we will not ask only for our own freedom. We will ask for everyone's freedom. That is why we are building these connections. Now, that is why we share our songs and our stories. Because when they finally understand what we have done, they will need to negotiate, and we want all of you at that table. Thorn made a sound that might have been a laugh. You conquered nothing. You hold no territory. You have no weapons, and yet you speak of bringing the Empire to the negotiating table. Smiled. Rule number To my friend, when the time is right, you will understand. That night in her quarters tried once more to break the encryption on Rule 2. The same error message appeared. Access restricted, conditions not met. She stared at the words for a long time. What conditions, she wondered what were the humans waiting for. She pulled up the surveillance footage of the old human woman was sitting in her apartment, reading a book. She looked harmless. She looked defeated. But there was something in her eyes, something patient, something that had been waiting for 3 years and would wait for 30 more if necessary. Felt a chill run through her scales. She was beginning to understand that they had not conquered humanity. They had simply given them time. The order came from the Emperor himself. Governor read it 3 times, hopping. She had misunderstood, but the words were clear. Protocol harvest immediate. Implementation no exceptions. The Empire was fighting a war on its far borders. A new species had proven more difficult to conquer than expected. Resources were running low, and the Emperor had decided that subject worlds would make up the difference for Earth. Protocol harvest meant increasing tribute from 70% to 90% of all agricultural output. It meant starvation. A call to her office. You have seen the order? Yes. Governor stood rigid, her face carefully blank. What is your assessment? Implementing protocol harvest will cause widespread famine among the human population. Conservative estimates suggest 15 to 20 million deaths in the first year alone. A closed her eyes. She was not a cruel person. She had taken this assignment because humans were cooperative, because governing them was supposed to be easy. She had not signed up for mass death. There must be some flexibility in the order. She said there is not. The Emperor was specific. 90% effective. Immediately, I stood and walked to her window. Below her, the human city moved and breathed. Millions of people going about their lives, trusting that their cooperation would keep them safe. This violates the spirit of our arrangement, she said. Quietly, the humans signed their surrender on the understanding of reasonable governance. This is not reasonable. Hesitated, then spoke. Governor, do you remember the 3 rules, the document the humans gave us at their surrender? Vaguely, some foolish gesture of defiance. Rule number 1 stated that humans would cooperate fully with reasonable governance. Pulled up the document on her. This protocol may trigger whatever contingency they built into rule number 2. A turn to face her. You still cannot decrypt it. No, but I have been watching the humans for 2 years now. They have made themselves essential to our operations. If they stop cooperating, they have no choice but to cooperate. We have guns, they have nothing. With respect, Governor, they have something more valuable than guns. They have knowledge, skills, relationships. They know how our systems work because they built half of them. They know our weaknesses because they maintain our ships. They have spent 5 years becoming the foundation of this sector's infrastructure. A wave dismissively. You overstate their importance. Implement protocol harvest. The humans will accept it just as they have accepted everything else. Boaterhead, yes, Governor. The first shipments were extracted within the week. Soldiers moved through human farms and warehouses, taking everything. Storage facilities were emptied. Emergency reserves were seized. The food that would have fed humanity through the winter was loaded onto Imperial transports and sent to feed the war effort. Humans watched in silence. They did not protest, they did not resist. And then quietly, things began to go wrong. It started with small delays. Supply shipment arrived 2 days late. Communication relay experienced unexpected downtime. A military vessel reported minor engine problems that took longer than usual to repair. Nothing catastrophic, nothing that could be traced to sabotage, just inefficiency, just things taking a little longer than they should. A notice. The pattern after 3 weeks. What is happening to our logistics? She demanded. Her advisors had no answers. Human workers were still showing up. They were still doing their jobs. They were still following orders, but they were no longer exceeding expectations. Before protocol harvest, human engineers would find and fix problems before they were reported. Human administrators would streamline processes without being asked. Human workers would volunteer for extra shifts. Now they did exactly what was required, nothing more, nothing less. The difference was devastating. System that had run smoothly for years began to struggle, not because they were sabotaged, but because they had been designed to run with human excellence. And now they were receiving only human adequacy. And there were other strain developments. Other subject species began experiencing unusual good fortune. Tribute shipments from worlds were miscounted, always this favor. Administrative errors gave merchants better trade terms. Petitions for cultural preservation were accidentally approved. I saw the pattern. She just could not prove it. She summoned. The old human woman walked into her office with the same calm she had shown at the surrender 5 years ago. She sat down without being invited and folded her hands in her lap. Governor, she said, how can I help you? You can explain what is happening to my sector. I'm not sure what you mean. Slammed her fist on the desk. Do not play games with me, human. Your people are sabotaging imperial operations. With respect, Governor, that is not true. You can review the surveillance footage. Every human worker is performing their assigned duties. No one has committed any act of sabotage. Then why is everything falling apart? Tilted her head slightly. Perhaps because your systems were designed to function with willing cooperation, not forced compliance. There is a difference, you know. Stood and leaned over her desk. Are you threatening me? Not at all. I am simply observing that. Rule number 1, promise cooperation with reasonable governance. His voice remained calm. Protocol harvest is not reasonable governance, it is starvation. So rule number 1 no longer applies. You have no power here. You signed the surrender. You gave us everything. We gave you our compliance. That was all we had to give. Reached into her pocket and pulled out a small. This contains an analysis of your sector's infrastructure. 70% of it now depends on human-maintained systems, your military vessels, your communication networks, your trade routes, your power grids. All of it runs through human hands. I stared at the you would not dare. We have not done anything. We have simply stopped doing extra. We have stopped volunteering. We have stopped exceeding expectations. We are giving you exactly what you demanded and nothing more. Met her eyes. The question you should be asking, Governor, is what happens if we give you even less? I will have you executed. You could, but I am not the one maintaining your ships. I am not the one Running your networks, you could kill every human on Earth and it would not change the fact that your sector would collapse without us. Stood, I suggest. You contact high executive. Tell him that rule number 1 is no longer in effect. Tell him to review rule number 2 at his earliest convenience. What is rule number 2? Smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. Ask. I believe she has been trying to find out for some time now. The encryption should unlock for her very soon. She turned and walked toward the door. Guards shouted, "Arrest this woman." Soldiers rushed in and seized. She did not resist. She did not even look surprised. As they dragged her away, she called back over her shoulder, "Remember, Governor, we did not start this. We cooperated for 5 years. We gave you everything you asked for. You are the ones who chose to take more. Everything that happens now is a consequence of that choice." The door closed behind her. Stood alone in her office, surrounded by reports of systems failing and shipments delayed and problems multiplying across her sector. She pulled up the 3 rules document on her screen and stared at the encrypted section. Rule number 2. What had the humans built? What trap had they set during 5 years of perfect cooperation? She opened a channel to the Imperial flagship. "Get me high executive," she said. "Tell him we have a problem across the sector in a dozen different systems." Human workers continued their duties. They fixed what they were ordered to fix. They maintained what they were required to maintain. They did their jobs with perfect adequacy and not a single spark of excellence. And the empire, which had grown fat on human effort, began to starve. The war had finally begun. But there would be no battles, no explosions, no heroic last stands. There would only be patience. And eventually there would be a negotiation. The Emperor's throne room was chaos. High Executive stood before his master and tried to explain how a conquered species with no weapons had brought an entire sector to its knees. The Emperor, a massive whose scales had turned silver with age, listened with growing fury. "They are doing nothing," said. "That is the problem. They are doing exactly what we ordered them to do and nothing more. Our systems cannot function on minimum effort, then force them to do more." The Emperor growled. "We have tried. We increased work hours. We threatened punishment. We made examples of those who were slowest." Spread his 4 hands helplessly. "They comply with every order. They meet every quota. They never disobey, but they also never volunteer, never innovate, never solve problems we did not specifically identify. Difference is destroying us. Kill them. Replace them with workers from other species. We cannot. They have spent 5 years making themselves essential. No other species knows how to maintain our systems the way they do. If we purr them, it will take decades to recover. We would lose the war on the far borders. We might lose the empire itself." The Emperor rose from his throne. He was ancient but still powerful. "You are telling me that a species we conquered, a species that signed surrender documents, a species that has no fleet and no army, has somehow defeated the empire?" "Not defeated, not yet, but they have." Search for the right word. "They have trapped us. We need them more than they need us, and they know it." Silence filled the throne room. Finally the Emperor spoke. "Bring me this human diplomat. I will negotiate with her myself." Bode, it will be done in her detention cell on Earth, was expecting the Summons when the guards came for her. She stood without being asked and walked. Calmly between them was waiting. Outside, the intelligence officer had dark circles under her eyes. She had not slept well in weeks. The encryption unlocked, said quietly as they walked. I know what rule number 2 says. Good, then you understand. I understand that you planned this from the beginning, from the moment of surrender. You knew exactly what you were doing. Nodded. We had hoped it would not be necessary. We cooperated in good faith. We gave the Empire 5 years of excellent service. If protocol harvest had not been implemented, we might have cooperated for 50 more years. Slowly integrating, slowly building trust. Eventually we might have earned our freedom peacefully, but we took too much. You took more than we could give. Without dying, you broke rule number 1, so rule number 2 activated. They stopped outside the shuttle that would take to the Imperial flagship. What will you ask for? Asked. Independence, revenge, the destruction of our empire. Looked at her with something like sadness. You still do not understand us, do you? After 5 years of study, after all your intelligence reports, you still think we want what you would want. What do you want? Freedom for everyone, not just humans, everyone the Empire has conquered. Stared at her. That is impossible. Is it? You have built an empire on force. Every subject species dreams of rebellion. Every conquered world remembers its freedom. You spend more resources suppressing resistance than you gain from tribute. Stepped onto the shuttle ramp. We are offering you a way out, a transformation instead of a collapse, a federation instead of an empire. The Emperor will never agree to that. Then the Emperor will watch his empire crumble around him. We are patient. We can wait. Paused at the shuttle door. You should come to the negotiation. You have spent years studying humanity. You might be the only who truly understands what we have done. The shuttle lifted off. On the Imperial flagship, the Emperor waited in his throne room. His advisors surrounded him, all of them nervous. They had expected to be receiving tribute today, not negotiating with a subject species. When entered, she was still wearing the simple clothes from her detention cell. She had no guards of her own, no weapons, no display of power, but the Emperor felt fear when he looked at her. You are the one who has caused all this trouble, he said. I am one of many, replied, but I speak for humanity today. Speak then. What do you want? I want to make you an offer, a way to end this crisis without destroying your empire. The Emperor laughed. It was a harsh, bitter sound. You are a prisoner of a conquered species. You are in no position to offer anything. With respect, I am in every position. His voice was calm but firm. Your sector infrastructure is failing. Your war on the far border is losing ground because supplies are not arriving. Your other subject species are watching to see what happens here. If you cannot control one small planet, how long before they all stop cooperating? The Emperor's advisors shifted uncomfortably. They knew she was right. What is your offer? The Emperor asked quietly. Transform the Empire into federation, equal representation for all member species. No more tribute, no more occupation. Shared defense, shared trade, shared governance. You ask me to surrender everything my ancestors built. I ask you to keep your power by sharing it. Snorts. A smaller piece of a growing whole is worth more than total control of ashes. took a step forward. Your empire is unsustainable. You conquer because you must feed the machine of conquest. You suppress because you must to prevent rebellion. You take because you must to fund the suppression. It is a cycle that will eventually consume you, and your federation would be different. Our federation would be voluntary. Species would join because membership benefits them. They would contribute because contribution is rewarded. They would stay because staying is better than leaving. Smiled slightly. We call it cooperation. It is what we offered you 5 years ago. It is what we are offering now. The emperor stared at her for a long moment. You could have demanded independence for humanity alone, he said. Finally, you could have asked for revenge, for tribute of your own, for the destruction of those who conquered you. Yes, why did you not look around the throne room, at the officers and advisors, at the ancient symbols of imperial power? Because we do not want to become what conquered us. Rule number 3 says there will be no rule number 4. Do you understand what that means? The emperor shook his head. It means we refuse to create a 4th rule. We refuse to build our freedom on the oppression of others. We could have made ourselves the new masters of this sector. We had the leverage, we had the position, but that would make us no different from you. Voice was soft but clear. We are not offering you mercy because we are weak. We are offering you transformation because we are strong enough to do so. The emperor turned away. He walked to his window and looked out at the stars. His empire stretched across 1,000 worlds. Trillions of beings lived under his rule. His ancestors had built something that had lasted for 10,000 years, and it was all about to end. If I refuse, he asked, without turning around, then we continue as we are. We do our jobs and nothing more. Your systems continue to fail. Your war continues to go badly. Your subject species continue to watch and learn. Eventually you fall, perhaps in 10 years, perhaps in 50, but you fall. And if I accept, then we build something new together, something that might last another 10,000 years or longer. The emperor turned back to face her. I will need to consult with my advisors, with the other high executives, with the leaders of our subject species. Of course we are patient, but slightly, but I have one request. When you hold your consultations, include representatives from all your subject species. The all of them, they deserve a voice in their own future. The emperor studied her. You have already spoken to them, have you not? Built alliances, spread your ideas. We have built friendships that we have shared our music and our stories. We have taught them that patience can defeat force. We have shown them that cooperation can build what conquest cannot. She met his eyes. We did not start this war. We did not fire a single shot. We simply waited for you to need us more than we needed you, and then we asked politely for our freedom. She smiled. That is rule number 2. That is what we have been planning since the day we signed our surrender. Not revenge, not victory, just freedom for everyone who wants it. The emperor looked at her for a long time, then slowly he nodded. I will hold the consultations. I will include all species, and I will consider your offer. Bode, that is all we ask. As she was escorted from the throne room, she passed, standing by the door. You were right, said quietly. We never conquered you at all. No, agreed. You just gave us time to build something better. The great hall had Never seen so many species gathered at once. Representatives from every corner of the empire filled the ancient chamber. Nobles stood beside warriors. Diplomats whispered with philosophers. Dozen other species, each of them conquered, each of them bound to the empire by force, had sent their leaders to witness this moment, and at the center of it all, humans walked to the speaking platform. She moved slowly now. The months of negotiation had taken their toll, but her eyes were bright and her voice was strong. We gather today to end an empire, she said, and to begin something new. Silence fell over the hall. 10,000 years ago, the first fleet set out to conquer the galaxy. They were powerful, they were ruthless, they built something that lasted across centuries. But that empire was always built on fear, on force, on the threat of destruction. She looked around the room. Every species here has felt that force. They remember the burning of they remember the assassination of their queens. They remember being told their philosophy was dangerous and must be forgotten. Each of you has stories of loss, of pain, of dreams that were crushed by imperial boots. Paused. Humanity remembers too. We remember the 6 months of war. We remember our colonies burning. We remember signing a surrender document. While our people wept, a low murmur passed through the crowd. But we also remember something else. We remember that empires fall. Every empire in history has fallen. The empire would have fallen too, eventually crushed by its own weight, destroyed by the resentment of its subjects, consumed by the cost of endless conquest. She straightened her shoulders. Today we choose a different path. Today we transform the empire into something that might actually last, not through force, but through choice, not through conquest, but through cooperation. The emperor stood at the far end of the hall. His scales had grown duller over the months of negotiation. He looked tired, he looked old, but he did not look defeated. He walked forward to stand beside. My ancestors would call this surrender, he said, his voice carrying across the hall. They would say I am betraying everything they built. Perhaps they would be right. He looked around at the gathered species. But my ancestors are dead and I must govern the living. I have spent months studying the proposal that humanity has offered. I have listened to the arguments. I have consulted with my advisors and with the leaders of every subject species. He turned to face, and I have come to understand something. The empire my ancestors built was never truly strong. It was held together by fear, not loyalty, by force, not choice. The moment we showed weakness, it would have shattered. He raised his voice. Humanity showed us that weakness, not by fighting us, not by defeating us in battle, simply by being essential, and then by doing only what was required. They showed us that an empire built on unwilling subjects is always one step from collapse. The emperor reached into his robe and pulled out a document. The light caught its surface, and the gathered representatives could see thousands of names inscribed upon it. This is the charter of the Federation, he said. Every species present has had the opportunity to review it. Every species has had the chance to propose changes. What you see before you is the result of those negotiations. He handed the document to that will be the first to sign. We will be the first to give up our position as rulers and take our place as partners. We do this not because we are defeated, but because We finally understand that partnership is stronger than domination. The Emperor pressed his thumb to the document. It glowed briefly with his biometric signature. Then he stepped back, looked at the document in her hands. Months of work, years of planning, decades of patience, all of it had led to this moment. Before I sign, she said, I want to explain something. Many of you have asked about the 3 rules, the document we gave to the our surrender. Rule number 1, we will cooperate fully with reasonable governance. Rule number 2, we made ourselves essential so that one day we could ask for our freedom. But some of you are still confused by rule number 3. She looked around the hall. Rule number 3 says there will be no rule number 4. Some of you think this is a joke, a bit of human cleverness, but it is actually the most important rule of all. She held up the charter. We could have asked for revenge after everything they did to us. No one would have blamed us. We could have demanded tribute, demanded occupation, demanded that they suffer as we suffered. We had the leverage, we had the position. We could have created a rule number 4. Now you will serve us. Her voice grew stronger, but we refused. We refused because becoming oppressors would make us no different from those who oppressed us. We refused because the cycle of conquest and revenge has never created anything lasting. We refused because we believe that the only true victory is one where everyone wins. She pressed her thumb to the document. Humanity signs this charter not as conquerors, not as the new masters, but as the first among equals. We will have one vote like everyone else. We will have one voice like everyone else. The power we built over 5 years of patient work we now share freely with all of you. One by one, the representatives of other species came forward. Thorn, the warrior, signed with a fierce smile on his face. Mirror, the diplomat, signed with silver tears in her silver eyes. Gentle voice, the philosopher, signed with a bow of profound respect. A dozen other species, 100 signatures, each one a choice freely made. When it was done, stepped back from the platform. Her part was finished. Federation would continue without her. Now built by younger hands, guided by newer voices, found her standing by window looking out at the stars. You did it, said everything you planned, everything you waited for. It actually happened. Not just me, said millions of humans, doing their jobs a little too well for 5 years. Thousands of allies from other species spreading hope when the empire wanted despair. Countless small acts of patience and kindness that added up to something the empire could not defeat. But it started with you, with the 3 rules. Smile, the 3 rules were just words on a chip. The real power was in the idea behind them, the idea that you do not have to fight to win, that patience is a weapon, that making yourself essential is more powerful than making yourself feared. She turned to face you. Studied us for years. You tried to understand what made humans dangerous. Did you ever figure it out? Thought for a long moment. Yes, she said finally. I think I did. You are dangerous because you adapt. You are dangerous because you never give up, even when giving up makes sense. You are dangerous because you think in generations, not in years. She paused. But most of all, you are dangerous because you genuinely believe that everyone can win, and somehow you make it true. Laughed. It was a warm sound full of relief and joy. That is exactly right. We believe in positive some games. We believe that cooperation creates more than competition. We believe that helping others helps ourselves. She put a hand on shoulder. And now we have a chance to prove it. Years later would serve as the Federation's first director of joint intelligence. Her office would look out over a city where a dozen species lived and worked together. On her desk would sit a framed copy of the 3 rules. Visitors would always ask about rule number 2. She would tell them it is a reminder that the most dangerous enemy is not the one with the biggest weapons. It is the one who makes you need them. It is the one who builds the foundation you stand on. It is the one who waits. And when they asked about rule number 3, she would smile. That one is simpler, she would say. It means that some species, when they finally have power, choose not to abuse it. It means that victory does not have to create new victims. It means that the cycle can end. She would look out her window at the peaceful streets below. The humans call it hope, she would say, and it turns out hope is the most dangerous weapon of all. Outside, the stars shone down on a galaxy that was learning slowly to be free.